Today, I stand before you so thrilled and frankly so humbled to have the opportunity to lead this group of wonderful people who work all day and well into the night to make that ideal a manifest reality, all as part of their steadfast protection of the citizens of this country.
Incoming Attorney General Loretta Lynch has yet to take the first question during her nomination hearing, and she's already deep in the political soup. The federal investigation into the death of Eric Garner is on her docket. This as America is tearing itself apart with violent riots over too much policing. Let's welcome into MidPoint former Assistant United States Attorney for the Southern District of New York. You may recall he led the prosecution of the blind sheikh in the mid-90s. Andrew McCarthy joins us. Andrew, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Andrew, Loretta Lynch is seen as a very solid prosecutor, an excellent lawyer from everybody that we have seen and heard. But because she has the Garner case right now, is there a fear that she may be overzealous in her prosecution and in her desire to find a conviction here in light of the current climate in the U.S.?
Well, I don't really believe that any of these individual cases, whether it's Garner, the Garner matter in Staten Island, or what's going on in Ferguson, and even the Trayvon Martin case before that, I don't believe that the individual case is what the ballgame is about as far as the Justice Department is concerned. I think that they are using these cases pretextually to do broad investigations into the pattern and practices of the different police departments. There's a pattern of this that's gone on for a number of years. Basically, the Justice Department knows that with its $28 billion budget, these municipalities and states can't really afford to litigate with the Justice Department and its hundreds of lawyers and all that it can throw at this in the way of resources. So what they do is they use these cases as a pretext to come in, and then they negotiate what's known as a consent decree, which essentially requires the police department, as a cost of settling, to adhere its patterns and practices to something that's more Obama approved.
Now that's interesting when you talk about the consent decree and Obama approve then, because I think this is the fear many people have. As you look at it, as I talk to a lot of police officers, they will say that indeed in the Garner case, there may have been an overzealousness here, but there is still that policing on the beat issue and needing to protect themselves from crooks, if you will. We could spend hours going into that, but it's that consent decree and what the president wants. Isn't that a little scary, though, because the Justice Department is supposed to look at things dispassionately, and yet we're dealing at a time right now when most people believe it's being anything but dispassionate in looking at racial crime?
Yeah, well, this Justice Department has never been dispassionate from Eric Holder's first days in office, where he called the United States, the American people, cowards on the matter of race, to, days or weeks later, in the new Black Panther Party case, where they essentially snatched defeat from the jaws of victory after they had already won in court. So we know that they haven't been executing the law, enforcing the law in a racially objective and dispassionate manner, which is what the civil rights statutes require. They've had their thumb on the scales from the beginning. And what I'm talking about is not a speculative fear that this might be what's going on. There are now 20 big cities, more than 20 big cities across the United States that are under the thumb of these different consent decrees and are essentially being monitored by the Justice Department through the federal courts. And I think that's really what they're trying to accomplish. I understand why people are looking very hard at these cases. These are tragedies in their own way. I wrote myself last week that, I think that a mistake may well have been made by the grand jury in connection with the Garner case. But again, as far as the Justice Department is concerned, I don't think they have a civil rights case, not in Staten Island and not in these other places, because they'd have to show that the police in this individual case willfully schemed to deprive somebody of, essentially Mr. Garner in this case, of his civil rights. And anytime you have a situation, and I don't think anybody can contest this, where you have a good faith arrest, which is what was going on in Staten Island, and the police are in the position of using force because the suspect is resisting, you can argue about whether they use too much force. That's all fair, and I've done it myself. But the thought that they actually schemed ahead of time to willfully deprive somebody of their civil rights, motivated by racial animus usually, but whatever you think their motivation was, that seems to me to be preposterous.
Is it your fear that this Justice Department will use whatever they can to prove that? And you and I are in agreement on this because I've heard from a number of lawyers who said there is no evidence of a racial animus here in either case. But there are those who still fear that because it's the feds, because it's the DOJ, this department will do everything it can. And I'm trying not to say make anything up, because certainly that's not what you want to charge anybody with, but to at least go to that nth plus 1 degree to make sure that no matter what happens, they're going to get something racial to stick in this case, because that's what they need right now in the attitude and in the culture that we face right now in America.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to do that. They rattled their sabers in the Trayvon Martin case, and they said, oh, we're going to bring a civil rights case if the state doesn't do the right thing. And of course, when the state acquitted him, the guy who was involved in that shooting, Holder had to back down and admit that he didn't have a case. They're not going to bring a civil rights case in Ferguson either, or in Staten Island on the individual event. What they're going to do is file a civil suit under the 1994 statute, which, by the way, is the last time the Democrats before 2009 had both the White House and both houses of Congress. They railroaded this thing through, which is kind of the civil rights statutes writ large, and allows the Attorney General to go into federal court and ask for restraining orders and all kinds of civil relief to bring the police departments under the heel of a Justice Department monitor. And that's what I think they're after.
Can we at least say at this point that with all this, we can agree that there does need to be some changes, though, in policing, and there needs to be some retraining, if you will, because indeed times change, societies change, and maybe there are those still there who are a little overzealous and need to be pulled back?
I'm going to respectfully disagree with that. I think, we've seen a lot of evidence of racism in the last couple of weeks, most of it from the crowds of people who have been rioting, who said some really outrageous things. On the other hand, if we take the New York City Police Department as just an example, there were 250,000 misdemeanor arrests last year, and no incidents like the one we had in Staten Island. This is an aberration, and it's not nearly what the problem is here.
I tell you what, I'm out of time, but I appreciate the fact that you would respectfully disagree anytime. I want to remind everybody that your book is called Faithless Execution. And Andrew, we're going to have you on again to talk about it soon. A very happy holiday to you and yours, and thank you.
Thanks so much. You too.
We'll continue.